we start with that breaking news. The Bank of England has decided to hold the base rate, this for the 7th consecutive time, at 5.25%.
Yeah, the vote was 7-2 on the Monetary Policy Committee. 7 in favour of holding, 2 in favour of cutting. But does that mask actually greater dissent within some of those who were weighing the decision in their minds? Let's speak to Vicky Pryce, the Economist and Business Consultant. Vicky, this is what markets expected, but what does it tell us about the future?
We're not going to know what the Bank of England really thinks, apart from, as you rightly said, there is a 2-7 split right now, which is a bit of a worry. I had hoped that by this time we would have had more people joining those who wanted to see a cut. But we're not going to get full details of what the thinking is, I don't think, today, not as much as we would have done otherwise, because, of course, we're having the elections coming up. And one of the reasons I think that we haven't seen the drop that should have happened this month is because the elections have been called the snap election, which has prevented also quite a lot of the policymakers, those who decided today, to come out and tell us what they actually think. Normally you get loads and loads of talks given by them for various occasions, so you get some idea of what they're thinking, and that gives you and the markets a little bit more perspective of what may happen next. And now we haven't had it. So we are, it's a bit of a sort of blind alley, really, in terms of the exact timing of what will happen next. And my view is that we are going to see a cut. We'll see a cut to the first opportunity, so we'll see it in August.
Vicky, why should an election campaign get in the way of the Bank of England's job?
It's a very interesting question. The reason that has been given anyway by anyone who understands the way that these things work is that if they cut rates now, or even if they make any pronouncements about where the economy would be, it would be seized by one or other of the parties. So it would suddenly become political. And given that the Bank of England is independent, that's going to be a bit of a problem.
Sorry to interrupt, Vicky, but isn't a hold in interest rates equally political? It's still a decision.
Yes, you're absolutely right. But what it doesn't do is give necessarily any great help to one or other. And you could have thought, indeed, the way that you're thinking about it, that holding it means that they're not giving any ammunition or any help to the incumbents, because, of course, they've all been saying that, the economy has turned a corner and inflation is down and interest rates will come down soon, and then they'll take the credit. So it could be seen either way. And you're right. It's a very dangerous position to be in. So what I was looking at is what happened in Europe. The European Central Bank decided to cut rates, which it did do a couple of weeks ago, at the time of elections going on in Europe. So, in fact, the day they decided to cut rates, there was already an election for the European Parliament in the Netherlands. And there were more elections happening between then and then the following Sunday. So they decided, obviously, to ignore any of that concern and went ahead and cut rates anyway. But, of course, those rates are not going to be seized by any of the parties in either in government or wanting to, in the Parliament, in the European Parliament, who have any dominance, or any others that might want to argue that the whatever is going on is not going in the right direction. But surely it has been used a little bit in the campaigns. But here we seem to have gone into almost purdah for an independent central bank as well. And that is a bit of a problem. And it has prevented, in my view, that cut taking place that should really have happened.
Many people would have said that this perhaps could have happened, not this time, but maybe the time before, or even the time before that. But of course, in the context of UK inflation falling now as it is back to 2%, back to that Bank of England target, it hasn't been like that everywhere in the world. In the United States, we saw that tick up in inflation. Has what's been happening in other countries actually been feeding into the Bank of England's decision here, in that it's not just that we're an island, although it's delicious to be an island, that actually all these other countries and these concerns about global supply chains and global inflation uptick have fed into this too?
Well, yes, anything could happen, and you're absolutely right. We have seen also in the Eurozone a bit of an uptick but really we're talking about sort of 2.7%. We're very, very close to the targets that have been set by the central banks, and they're the same ones practically everywhere, the 2% target. You don't have to meet that target all the time, and you're right again in saying that we could easily have cut rates before and not really jeopardized anything very much in terms of where inflation is going, since most of it is linked to external factors such as energy and food, not very much linked to anything else. But the Europeans have cut their rates, despite the fact they knew full well that inflation was going to go up a little bit. And it goes up a little bit, and partly because of petrol prices going up. We've seen that here as well in our inflation figures that have come out yesterday. But also, they are not particularly concerned, the Europeans, about the fact that, yes, indeed, if you look at the 12-month basis, what you're comparing it with, which is the month of the year before, may have had more subsidies given to the energy sector that month, which are now no longer there, or anything else that could have happened. So you have to take risks up to a point. If you're a central bank, you cannot possibly be adjusting your expectations of interest rates every time there might be a little bit of a move up or a little bit of a move down. In the US is a bit different in that, of course, it's growing quite significantly. And one of the reasons why the Federal Reserve hasn't done very much is because of that. It has a fiscal and monetary expansionary policy right now in the US. They're spending huge amounts on propping up the economy anyway through Bidenomics, loads and loads of money going into particular sectors, supporting the green economy and everything else, and being quite protectionist in doing so. Europe and the UK are not in that position where, yes, things are picking up, but from quite a low base. Yeah. And therefore, the interest rate cut here should have been much more imminent than perhaps the markets have been adjusting in terms of their expectations on when it will actually be.
Amazing how the United States gets away with these huge deficits, big spending, big tax cuts, but of course we're not allowed to do that in the UK. Vicky Pryce, thank you so much for joining us and talking through this yet another hold from the Bank of England on interest rates.
Yes, a few of you actually getting in touch and saying this isn't a problem for you. Gary says rates are currently normal. Glad they didn't cut them. Left-wing Larry says, yes, interest rates stay the same. My savings are making loads. And with no mortgage on my 2 houses, I'm quids in. Hashtag loving it. Is that a bit of a wind-up, left-wing Larry? And Tony says, holding is... Well, he thinks it's political. He thinks they'll drop them when Labour get in.
Well, the expectation is now that there'll be this August drop. It feeds into my theory of Keir Starmer being the luckiest man on the face of the planet. Not only is inflation down at normal levels, interest rates expected to fall as soon as Starmer gets in, but also immigration expected to halve next year without any further changes. I mean, Keir Starmer's just going to rack up political win after political win after political win.
Well, we shall see. We shall see. Anyway, these stubbornly high interest rates and the cost of living, of course, continue to have an impact on households across the country. How is it affecting you, and will it change how you vote?
Well, throughout the election campaign, we've been asking voters about the things that matter to them during the campaign. And joining us from Manchester is the landlord, Cyan Astley, who's always voted Labour. She's joined by GB News reporter Sophie Reaper. Take it away, Sophie.
Good afternoon to you both. Yes, we've just heard, of course, that interest rates will be remaining the same. So to talk a bit about that, Cyan joins me now. We're up on the scaffolding of one of her properties, so safety first, of course. Cyan, we've just heard about interest rates. What's your initial reaction?
So hang on, bumblebee.
Oh, there's a bee.
The perils of summer.
There we go. Live television.
We're not having any falls today, especially off the scaffolding. I'm, of course, a little bit disappointed, as are hundreds of thousands of people with mortgages and loans where we're not going to see a fall in the interest rates and therefore a fall in our monthly payments. But I'm not surprised, I have to say. I'm not surprised that they've stuck where they are. I think we're going to see them come down in the future. But 5.25% is kind of average. We've got so used to interest rates being really, really super low. But I remember when I first bought a property in 1996, that was kind of 5%, that 5-6% mark, between 4 and 6. It's pretty normal, really. We're just not used to it.
In terms of you as a landlord, of course, this means that for another month, this is the 7th month in a row, the rates at which you'll be paying back will remain the same. How does that impact you, and how does it impact how you're going to vote in 2 weeks' time?
It impacts me, of course, because I'm paying more for the mortgage, like lots of other people, on a monthly basis. But it's not just that, is it? Everything's been more expensive. Taxation is through the roof. Everyone feels like you're just taxed at every which way you turn. You're taxed when you go to the supermarket. You're taxed on your council tax. I mean, I'm really nervous about Labour not talking about whether they're getting an increased council tax. I'm a landlord, but this may surprise people. I'm also a human being. So there are other things which affect me, which the political parties are talking about. You know, the taxation's a really big one. Yeah, things like, I don't know, national health, the National Health Service. My other half has had 5 operations in the last 4 years, and we've had to pay for private healthcare because we haven't been able to get it on the National Health because it's just broken. And that kind of stuff is affecting us on a daily basis as well. So there's a whole other host of things that are affecting me as an individual, both as a woman, as a business runner, you know, on a daily basis, not just interest rates. And both parties.
Well, we've obviously been hearing manifestos from all the major parties over the past week or so. Has there been anything in those manifestos that's really made you think that's who I'm going to give my vote to and this is why? Or has it just been a bit of a wet lettuce for you?
Well, round here in South Manchester, the Conservative Party is a non-starter anyway, so it's always between, in my particular constituency, it's between Labour and Lib Dems. I'm not particularly fond of a lot of the Lib Dem policies, I've got to be honest. But Labour make me nervous. They really make me nervous. It's more about what they're not saying than what they are saying. And the next week, I think, hopefully, there'll be more substantial flesh to the bones of the manifesto, because I think there's just not enough in there, really, for me to make a call yet.
So there's 2 weeks to go, and you've still not made your decision. Well, there we go. Well, and that is why it's so important that we, as the People's Channel, we have our people's voices like Cyan, who can give us a real insight into what the people of this country are thinking as we reach, we're 2 weeks away now from that general election.
Really, really interesting. Thank you so much, Sophie, and thank you to Cyan Astley there, who's a landlord up near Manchester. Very interesting. Worried about what Labour isn't saying rather than what they are saying. Lots of people want more meat on the bones. Polling, 20 points ahead of the Conservatives at the moment. People do want to know what's happening with council tax, what's happening with other taxes. So,
Yeah, but of course, if you're the Labour Party, you're sitting there 20 points ahead of the polls. What incentive do you have?